Wyatt with a brand new episode of Dear World Live, brought to you by the Doha Debates. I am so grateful to you for joining us today on our stream. If you're watching on Facebook, on Twitter, or on YouTube, you are all welcome. This is Dear World Live, where every week we tackle a different aspect of how the coronavirus is affecting all of our lives, day to day, right now, but also looking into the future. Of course, a lot of us around the world are isolating or physical distancing, but we're doing it together, and that counts for something. So, as I said, every week we tackle a different aspect of the show, but this particular show is incredibly important because it has such a big impact on future generations. I'm talking about the way the coronavirus is impacting education systems around the world. Now, in order to kind of explain some of this, I want to start thinking about what the situation is that we're dealing with. So let's put up that first graphic. So here, as of now, according to the United Nations, 153 nations have shut schools completely, and others have localized closures. Listen, 70% of the world's student population has been affected. That's more than 1 billion people worldwide. The stakes are high. We need to find solutions, but that's what Dear World Live is all about. Thank you to all of you joining me right now. In a moment, we'll get on with the show, but I've got one more thing to show you. These images are so stark and important because they show what the consequence of the lockdown has been. Bedrooms have all of a sudden become classrooms, and schooling has had to move online, but not everyone has that option of e-learning. More than half of the world's population has no internet at all. So, what is the consequence for them? How will they get an education? In a moment, I will be tackling this issue on Dear World Live with my 3 wonderful guests. But before that, I want to talk to you guys because you are guests as well. And I always love to hear from you. What is your experience of education? Are you a teacher, a parent, a carer, a student yourself? How has the coronavirus impacted the way that you are learning? Send in your comments and your questions and your thoughts as the show progresses. Just write it into the little comment section of wherever you're watching, and I'll be able to put them in the show so you can literally be in the show as we go along. For now, though, why don't you just say hello to me and Dear World Live and just leave a little comment to tell me where you're watching from. I love to get those as well. So without any further ado, I want to introduce my 3 guests for the next half hour of this show. We are joined by Sherrie Westin. She is the President of Social Impact and Philanthropy for Sesame Workshop, the nonprofit organization behind Sesame Street. She leads efforts to serve and educate vulnerable children around the world through media and targeted initiatives. Dr. David Moinina Sengeh is Sierra Leone's education minister. Born and raised in Sierra Leone, he received his PhD at MIT in the United States, and he's a TED Fellow. There he is right there. And Larry Rosenstock is a CEO and founder of High Tech High, a network of public charter schools in California. He has taught carpentry in urban high schools and, right, because that's not enough, served as an attorney at the Harvard Center for Law and Education. You are all very welcome, but there's someone who's going to be watching and listening to all of you with me. Fiona Cho is there. Fiona, hello. You're joining us from Seoul in South Korea. So thanks for staying up this late. I'm really appreciative to you. You are currently a first-year student at Ewha Women's University, majoring in international studies. Whew, the brain power in this Dear World Live episode is astonishing to me. So let's crack on. Let's get on with it straight away. Sherry, I want to come to you first.
Okay.
So for those of us who don't really know what Sesame Street is, you can see here, Big Bird, the Cookie Monster, and others live and kind of talk to us through this hit kids TV show that's been going on for a long time. And out of those characters and those interactions, we learn so much. That's the beauty of Sesame Street. But you work on the Sesame Workshop. What is that?
Well, Sesame Workshop is the nonprofit that produces Sesame Street around the world. So as you say, so many people know Sesame Street, but they may think of it just as a domestic television show in the United States. And in fact, Sesame Workshop produces programs like Sesame Street all around the world. We're in about 150 countries. And in many of those countries, the work I'm most proud of is where we create local productions of Sesame Street. So it's not just the US version. They're created to reflect children's culture with indigenous Muppets, their language, and addressing the issues those children are challenged by.
Now, you launched a brand new show in February, in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, Alan Simsim. What's special about this show?
Well, Ahlan Simsim, which means welcome sesame in Arabic, is throughout the Middle East, but it was a part of our original humanitarian initiative. We started a program with the International Rescue Committee, the IRC, and because of funding from the MacArthur Foundation, we're literally creating the largest early childhood intervention in the history of humanitarian response. And that entails both the broadcast media, which you think of Sesame Street for, and Ahlan Simsim is shown throughout the region on broadcast, but also on mobile, YouTube, every digital platform possible. And then we partner with the IRC to create content like storybooks, lesson plans, activities, so that their on the ground people can have these tools and resources for direct services reaching the most vulnerable children and families, and that's through learning centers, home visits, healthcare clinics. So you get almost a surround sound of Sesame, if you will, to help provide early education for children affected by the Syrian crisis.
Absolutely. And this is what's so interesting about the work that you do, because it's not just about learning your ABCs or your 1, 2, 3s, but it's learning emotional skills and also how to get on with one another. And in that vein, I want to show our video. This is important. Let's see this.
هادي كيفكن؟ اهلا جاد، بتعرفوا انا كثير اشتقت لكم. وانا كمان.
هادي انا كثير اشتقت لك واشتقت لجاد، اشتقت لكل اصحابي.
بعرف بسمة، مع انه نحن ساكنين جنب بعض يعني، بس عم نحاول نحمي حالنا ونحمي اللي حوالينا ونقعد بالبيت ونلتزم بالتباعد الاجتماعي.
ها؟ تباعد اجتماعي؟ هادي شو يعني تباعد اجتماعي؟
جاد، التباعد الاجتماعي يعني لازم يكون في مسافة 2 متر بينك وبين أي شخص مش من عيلتك. يعني أحسن شيء إنه نقعد في البيت وما نختلط بأي حدا برات البيت.
يعني زي ما بنعمل هلا
بالضبط بسمة، هينا نحن شاطرين وقاعدين في البيت وعم نشوف وبنحكي مع بعض على التليفون.
تمام.
أنا كتير مبسوط إنه عم نقدر نشوف بعض ونطمن على بعض على الفيديو، وهيك بنقدر نقضي وقت مع بعض ونتسلى ونلعب ألعاب كمان.
وبنقدر نغني كمان.
وكمان نحكي لبعض كيف عم نقضي وقتنا بالبيت.
بالضبط.
Okay.
All right. So I think
two questions. Okay. The first one, how that was a very quick turnaround video. So you made that very quickly. And secondly, with reference to a lot of the work that you do, especially when you talk about those years between 0 and 5, a newborn baby and a 5-year-old, why is it important to keep children involved in this conversation through the Sesame Workshop?
Well, first of all, that was a quick turnaround. And as you can see, we're using the Ahlan Simsim characters. That's Basma and Jad. And there's so much of a backstory because Basma is a little purple Muppet, a little girl. Jad had to leave his home, becomes best friends with Basma. So you see that we're incorporating storylines so that these children can relate to these characters. And then obviously with the pandemic, we immediately started creating content that would help children understand, to give them the tools they need to feel less alone. And you saw the storylines about the importance of staying at home and social distancing. You even see it's a Zoom where they're connecting via Zoom because our Muppeteers are literally broadcasting from home. We're not in studios either. But I think it speaks to the power of media and educational media in particular in a time like this, because through media, we're able to reach these children and families even in isolation. We may not be able to do the direct services programs, the learning centers, but we can reach them over their phones, over radio, over television with such valuable, critical early education. And to your point, there is so much research today on the very important first years of a child's life. In those first 5 years, they have more rapid brain development than any other time. And so it is so critical. The return on investment with early learning is greater than anything we could do. And we're also creating content to help parents engage with children. Often what we're creating is not just for the child, but it's a tool to be a catalyst for that engagement, because we know that's the most important thing to help children learn.
Absolutely, and we're blessed because we've got the breadth and depth of the education system here with us. But I'd like to turn my attention now to Dr. Moinina Sengeh. He is the Education Minister over in Sierra Leone. Doctor, to you first. Let's put a lot of this into context. Sierra Leone has faced multiple enormous challenges with a civil war, the Ebola crisis, and now with the coronavirus pandemic. That's a lot to be getting on with, and all within your lifetime. How might all of these different sort of challenges inform your government's response to the problems that the coronavirus is posing to education in Sierra Leone?
I think it's an excellent question, and I will answer that, and do want to add that the same Sierra Leone also has wonderful festivals and wonderful activities and music and wonderful arts that all and social interaction and religious tolerance that allows for some of these things to happen, right? So in Sierra Leone, I think about 70% of our people are Muslim, and it's very normal to see Muslims and Christians interacting. So as a country, we do have challenges, certainly, and those challenges, as you'd mentioned, and the positives that exist have helped us be able to respond. And more, in particular, the Ebola crisis. So if you think about, well, during the war, there was a period when schools were closed for almost a year. And during Ebola, schools closed again for almost a year. So as you rightly said, we do have instances in which schools have been closed for several generations. And whilst it's not a thing to want to have a badge of credit for, it means that when there were pending school closures because of COVID, we activated several things. So we activated school safety mechanisms. People started washing hands. We had trained all the teachers from during Ebola on how to manage emergencies, and we reactivated those networks. We started measuring temperature and getting isolation locations ready at schools, and gave 2 weeks notice to all learners as well. And so it really was that we activated several things, and we started the radio teaching, and the radio teaching is something that we also started during Ebola, and we knew that there were challenges in who we reached. And our goal now was to focus on two things: improving the content of the learning material and broadening the reach, because even radio does not reach everyone. And so we went and did assessments and tried to ensure that there were transmission available everywhere. And the challenge with Corona, obviously, unlike Ebola, is that the transmission is very different, the healthcare transmission. And so you use lots of kids who are asymptomatic together, right? And that's a major challenge, because you don't know whether they are carriers.
Absolutely. So then this is my next question to you, Doctor. If we know that the coronavirus is something that we're going to be living with for at least another year, too, if not for however long this challenge lasts, even with a vaccine, it's going to be difficult to get it to all the people immediately that need it. I wonder, what is the current situation like? And then, and I want to understand from you, what steps have you taken, Dr. David, to try and make sure that you do your duty, your job to your citizens, especially the young girls and boys that need your help right now?
Right. So the school is the safest place for many children around the world. And that is really important. And when now we see the children are not at their safe haven, they're exposed to several risks. And so for girls, particularly with sexual violence, and during Ebola, we saw that estimates have about 10,000 girls got pregnant. And some of the things that we've done is we've had a campaign now ongoing called the Zero Schoolgirl Pregnancy Campaign, where we go to communities, we engage with communities, because the pregnant schoolgirl is a victim. The pregnant schoolgirl is not to be blamed for getting pregnant. There are many systemic challenges that lead to that being the case, to the final pregnancy being an outcome. And so what we've done is to engage children there directly, and their parents and their community leaders, their religious leaders. We've made it easy for everybody to be included. If you get pregnant, and you can still learn when schools reopen. One of the other things we've done is school feeding. Schools is where most children go to get meals. And now they're not in school, but that doesn't mean you can't feed them and their brains stop developing and stop needing the nutrients. So we are undergoing a series of campaigns currently where we bring dry rations, now not just to those children, but to their homes as well. But to your point about learning in particular, we often, anyway, we're using radio, we're using TV, we're using digital, we're using devices, but we forget that paper too is technology. And this week, my team is beginning to have paper packets that we're sending to children to complement all of these things. Paper is technology, and it's not available to every child. And there are places that are hard to reach that you can't just send things to, but where mobile is. And so we're focused on hybrid technologies, hybrid solutions, which is part of our national plan, where you're focusing on data, where you have data and connectivity, TV, where you have TV and connectivity, mobile SMS and USSD, where you have it, and paper technology, where you have it. But to your point about schools reopening, our education system has to change. Pre-COVID, there was time already for that to be the case. There is a learning crisis. We all knew that, but now there is this education crisis that's apparent to all of us. And the challenge and the big mistake is going to be if schools reopen and we expect that the same methods that we used pre-COVID must be done again. That would be the biggest mistake.
I love that, and I'm glad I'm talking to you because you're responsible for that, right? So
Sure.
It's your job to deliver that. And I'll come back to you, Dr. David. At the moment, I want to move on to my third guest, Larry Rosenstock. You live in one of the richest states, in one of the richest nations on earth. Quite different to David's experience.
Yes, it is.
However, you have set up High Tech High because there was a need. So before I ask you what High Tech High is, why were you motivated after all the amazing things that you've done to set this up?
Well, first of all, something else about San Diego is California is the 5th largest economy in the world. And it's a complicated place, especially now. I landed up here a little bit by mistake. When I was working at Harvard at the Center for Law and Education, I was working on something called the School to Work Opportunities Act. And that is a law with Paul Weckstein that we crafted that said students should gain strong experience in and understanding, of all aspects of an industry, including finance, planning, management, underlying principles of technology, labor issues, community issues, health and safety issues, and environmental issues as they pertain to that industry. I still can't believe I have that memorized after all these years. That was under the Clinton administration, and it was an effort to get young people, in particular those of moderate means, to have opportunities to go into the tech sector in various ways. And the reason that we picked 16-year-olds was because you had to be 16 to work in a hospital. And we also found with adolescents that when they learn to take care of somebody else, as in a hospital, not like as a doctor, but in other ways, they learn how to take better care of themselves. And so we got a big grant to run around the country from a resource and look at examples of it, my team of wonderful people. So we did that for 3 years. I landed up in San Diego. It was the last school we were going to visit. It was the closest school to Mexico in the United States. There was a 17-year-old girl there who was pregnant. All the kids were of color, all 18 of them. She had done a study on whether or not the boy inside her should be circumcised from a sexual, religious, health perspective about the boy inside her, and nobody was giggling. And everybody was like an adult among these inner city kids. And the team that I was with looked at each other in silence and winked. We finally found really what we were looking for. And then somebody named Bill Gates heard of us and helped us get going. In fact, he calls us one of his greatest success stories.
Yes, he does. So to that end, then, can you tell us very specifically why is High Tech High special and what is it?
Well, we accept kids purely by blind lottery, first of all. We have 16 schools, and the schools are small. That's another very important thing. Oh, and now people are looking at the rockets. Let me tell you about those rockets. There's a place that's 5 miles north of here, 5 hours north of here in California, not for bad purposes, but for research purposes, that University of California, UCLA, the US Navy, and High Tech High are allowed to show up rockets. Our students have created the rockets you're seeing, and those rockets are 2% shy of breaking the sound barrier. And they just cannot believe that they can't be back at school working.
I wish I was at High Tech High, because that is an education if I've ever seen one. So let me get to the point. How has High Tech High been affected by the coronavirus?
It's tough. It's very, very tough because
Thank
of the
you for being honest. Yes, it is tough.
Because of the demography of our families, right? So you have students that are locked up in homes all day long. So that's very hard for children because they can't really go out yet. And in some cases, their parents can't go out yet either. In some cases, their parents have to go to work and the students are alone. So we are doing classes, technically online. My daughter she teaches in Harlem in New York City. And she was coming here a few months ago for 4 days with her kitten. And everybody in my family who are doctors said, you're not just coming for 4 days, you're coming for 4 months. The kitten is in the next room from here. And she, early this morning, is teaching her class to kids in New York City. Wow. And she's doing it digitally herself. And she's got first grade girls. Actually, I went in there to hear them all because they're all at their homes. And when she starts the class, they all just are so excited to see each other, and they make so much noise. It's my favorite part of the whole day, and she's going to get them back to work. Yeah.
What a lot of you have been saying, Larry, that the education or going to school is more than just getting an education. It's learning interpersonal skills. It's getting a square meal every day. It's making sure that you're at least in some kind of, to Dr. David's point, safe environment. Yeah. Thank you, Larry. Okay, I want to take a moment to thank all of our wonderful viewers. Those of you who are watching from all over the world, I'm so thankful to you. We've got people here watching from Morocco, from Sierra Leone, from Ethiopia, from the Congo, the Philippines. Hello, Shiva, how are you? It's good to see you. Prakesh is watching from Nepal. It's really, really great to see you all. Thank you for telling me where you are all watching from. This is Dear World Live, brought to you by the Doha Debates. Each week, we look at a different aspect of how the coronavirus is impacting our day-to-day lives. And this week is no different. We're focusing on how the coronavirus is affecting education systems around the world. And I want you now to start sending in your questions. What do you want to ask our three excellent guests? What are you going through? Tell me. I want to hear from you. Are you struggling with education and schooling at the moment? Are you a parent, a teacher, a student yourself? I want to hear from you. And those of you watching in Bosnia and Herzegovina and Nigeria, you are welcome also. Joining me on the show today is Sherrie Westin. She is the President of Social Impact and Philanthropy for Sesame Workshop. Larry Rosenstock is the CEO and founder of High Tech High, and Dr. David Moinina Sengeh is Sierra Leone's Education Minister. Thank you, guys. Hold on for a sec, because I'd like to go across the world, if I might, and speak to Fiona. Fiona, you've been listening to everything everyone has been saying patiently. What do you make of all of this chat? Because these are really interesting perspectives from different continents around the world.
Well, I think it's really interesting that we have the perspectives of different people living in different countries that are facing entirely different situations right now. I thought that my experience was pretty unique, but when I listened to Dr. David speak, for instance, I feel like what I'm experiencing is something that I should be grateful for, and I should be grateful for the technology that I have and the fact that I'm even able to continue my education online. So it feels really great to listen to all of these different perspectives and learn more about how different people are coping with the pandemic and continuing their education online.
That's absolutely right. Now, I've got a couple of questions from you, but to those of you who are joining the stream now, you are welcome. This is Dear World Live, as ever. So I want to know, now, a few months ago, if I'm right, the academic year began in Seoul, in South Korea. And as a first-year student, am I right in thinking that you've had your entire university education up until today online? What has that been like, Fiona?
So it's been a really bizarre experience just starting college online. It certainly wasn't the experience that I hoped for, but we did transition pretty smoothly into our online education, our online college system. So for now, I've been mostly having my classes through live Zoom lectures and recorded lectures as well. So it's been a combination of those two. And although I have limited interactions with my classmates, I'm able to see some of them through these live Zoom calls and still see my professors through the screen on these recorded lecture videos. And so while it's been a smooth transition, I know that a lot of my friends and I are still hoping to return to school quickly because we crave that human contact and those human interactions that we have in the normal classroom setting for sure. So we're just all waiting for this pandemic to calm down so that we can see each other for the first time.
Absolutely, because comparatively speaking, South Korea has done an astonishing job at trying to curb the spread of the coronavirus compared to you, relatively, the rest of us, me here in the United Kingdom, those of us in Africa, in the Americas, we've not done as well. So if anything, you're more likely to be able to go back to school. But with your amazing experience, I want to know, do you have any advice for students who are currently either just about to start e-learning or they have already started e-learning? What tips can you give them?
This might be an obvious one, but just time management is really key when it comes to e-college, e-learning. I feel like because there isn't really anyone physically to remind us of our assignments and our recorded lectures that we have to watch by certain due dates, it's up to us to manage our time schedule and make sure that we're getting all of these things done. And also because we don't have to physically commute to school, we have to make sure that there are certain deadlines and certain videos that we need to watch once again. So just, I can't place enough emphasis on time management, just keeping track of all your schedule and all the things that you need to complete. If you're sure of all the list of things that you need to do by the end of the day, I think there really won't be a problem when it comes to online college.
So some things don't change because time management is something that I found very challenging 10 years ago when I started to go to college. Okay, let's bring all of my guests in, plus Fiona at this point. You're now all in on the conversation together, so feel free to interact with one another. Before that, Fiona, I think you've got a question for our guests. Is that right?
Right. So I have a question that's open to all of our guests. Here in Korea, a lot of students are demanding for the refunding of their college tuitions. And so I feel like the important question here is, are these students correct in their belief that an online education can't ever have the same value or merit as schooling in a physical classroom setting?
Who wants to take this on?
Well,
I think Larry should take this one.
I'll say a bit about it. In addition to that, we have a lot of students that had several colleges that they got into and they never got a chance to visit any of them and decide which one they want to be. And most of the universities here, all the University of California, which is a huge system, they probably won't be doing it live in the fall, it looks like right now, because we all pretty much know this is going to be coming back for quite a few more months, you know, in the fall. So it's tough for people, for students for sure. And I wonder, we are getting the money back for what they paid in our case, but I wonder how many kids who were on the edge of going to college now won't go to college because they have been put off by this circumstance. That's a concern that I have.
Well, and Fiona, I can add to this because I actually have a son who just turned 18 who's going to college in the fall, hopefully. And I will say it's something that Nelafar mentioned earlier when she said it's not just the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, you know, and again, Sesame's focused on preschool, but we look at a whole child curriculum, and it is so important for them to have the social and emotional skills to thrive and to build resilience. And it's not just literacy and numeracy. And while I think there are incredible digital learning platforms, and thank God for them in times like this, right? But I do worry about, even for my own son, if he has to do his beginning of college online, he's missing out on all those experiences, a new dorm, new friends, independence. And I think that you certainly can have access to quality education. Look at programs like the Khan Academy, and there's proven results in terms of educational outcomes and learnings. But I do worry about not having that larger experience, which includes interacting with others.
That's absolutely right. Dr. David, can I come to you? But can I come to you with a very specific question that you might be able to see popping up on your screen? This is from Charmaine. And Charmaine says, so many children around the world aren't eating enough because no school, especially poor countries. What do you say when people say things like that? What is your response to someone who does something like that?
I mean, I think it is back to the school being a safe space for many people, psychologically, in principle of nutrition, in learning, and that safety gets lost. And with schools being closed, and in what we're doing in Sierra Leone, and I'm sure many people are doing, is sending dry ration to people's homes, particularly for those who are most vulnerable. And it's a valid point. I think back to the idea of physical contact and what Sherry and everybody is saying, it's you can't learn. You may learn empathy on the computer, but you have to practice it. Learning is about practicing and about doing. So a lot of those things that we may learn, we can sit and watch empathy courses online, but there's nothing that beats it from seeing your colleague fall down and stumble and you interact with them, or be in a class with somebody in the evening. So there's that practice, learning and practice. And there's also something that we're missing, which is where for us who are parents, that we are forced to be with our children, forced in the sense that we are spending more time with our children. And the role of learning and the role of parents and adults and community members and your cousins and your brothers and the guy who's the security or the person who's helping. We each have a role. We each have always had a role in learning, but we never explicitly discussed that. And nobody's coming to tell us now, okay, mother, okay, father, okay, cousin, here's your role in supporting your colleague, your sister, your brother, your cousin in learning. And that is missing as well. And so this physical contact, it could be totally a loss, or there's an opportunity here for us to think about and really target families and communities to support learning as well.
Absolutely. I'm gonna go through a whirlwind of questions, and then you guys can pick and choose which ones you want to answer. First of all, a question from me, because I'm still allowed to ask them. I really want to understand, because all of you, Dr. David, Sherry, Larry, well, not you, Fiona, but maybe one day, you're all involved, and you've all amplified the role that education plays in the life of young girls. You've all worked to try and get young girls in education and stay in education. Dr. David, if I can come to you first, you've written and mentioned in the past that one of the biggest problems with the Ebola crisis was that once girls were out of formal education, they never came back. And this was a huge problem. So half of the world's 1 billion or thereabouts number might get out of formal education and never come back. What are you doing specifically, and how are you focusing on it, you and your government? And then I'd like to ask each of you guys in your roles what you think about this, the importance of girls staying in school and in education.
Every metric that we have, right? So we have the district health survey, but every metric indicates the value of a girl completing secondary school on the economy, on health, on everything. So it's unequivocal, the value of every additional year that a girl spends in school, right? And one of the things we did before schools closures was we overturned the ban that the previous government had on girls who were pregnant from accessing formal school. And the president and the cabinet, I think maybe a week before schools closed, overturned this ban that had been there for 10 years or 11 years. And this is really important because, as I said, being pregnant cannot be used as a victimization tool to limit girls from accessing learning and education.
Absolutely.
And this is what was the case. And so we overturned that, and we are writing a radical inclusion policy and a comprehensive safety policy to include everyone. And in addition to that, as I mentioned, we are then having this zero tolerance, not this zero pregnancy campaign. And we're now developing a scheme that I'm bringing to cabinet to think about how we incentivize girls to come and stay in school, not just because of COVID, but a scheme that lasts into the future, hopefully.
Nalufar, I'd love to take this one too, because this again is a place where I think you can use the power of media and Muppets, if you will. One of my favorite projects is in Afghanistan, where we have a local production called Bache Simsim, which means Sesame Garden in Dari and Pashto. And because girls' education is so critical there and so many girls don't have access to quality early learning, you can imagine we are reaching children with quality educational content who have no other access to early learning. And one of the things that's so important, again, we use these characters, these engaging characters. The lead Muppet is a little girl named Zari, who wears her hijab and her school uniform. And we're able to inspire young girls, give them a sense of possibility. But equally important, we're showing young boys that it's okay for girls to go to school, to have an education, to have different roles and responsibility. And with everything we do research to test our outcomes. And we see through research that little boys who watch test 29% higher on gender equity, saying they think it's okay for their sisters to go to school. And even research from fathers saying that they've decided to change their mind about sending their children to school because of watching Bache Simpson. And we're reaching children and their parents in countries like Afghanistan, where they watch with an adult. So I think part of the success is it's non-threatening. It's coming through a children's show.
Absolutely. Let me ask this question then to you, Larry, and maybe you, Sherry, because you're really good, well placed to it. There's formal education and schooling, but then there's the importance. There's kind of what you guys do, which is, well, Sesame Workshop and High Tech High are non-traditional ways of educating or learning. So, you don't get into school at 8 in the morning and you don't leave at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And that's brilliant because you're able to access communities, like you said, in Afghanistan, and indeed in America, that would otherwise be seriously underserved. So bearing that in mind and the potential that you hold here, because we are a solutions-orientated show here, what do you think, is there any opportunity in this very strange time where you guys can access certain groups that would otherwise be left behind? Let me come to you first, Larry.
Well, first of all, I'm not just saying this for Sherry. I still love Sesame Street because I now have a grandson who's a year and a half, and he's a character, and he loves it because the whole show.
I'm so glad. I'm glad to hear
that. Character too, and so Sherry, we have to talk sometime.
Okay.
I really about a lot of things. Yeah. Well, let me just say this and tie what you're asking into college going. Well, we had our theory 20 years ago when High Tech High began was that everyone was going to go to college. And people can question that, but that's what we're going to do because it's safer to be in college for the next 4 years, even though it has its risks. And so every one of our college placement officers, and remember we have 16 schools, every one of our college placement officers has two characteristics. First of all, half of them are female, half of them are male. They have two characteristics. They were the first, they worked at a highly selective college admissions office for at least 4 or 5 years in admissions, and they're the first member of their family to go to college. Those were the people that we wanted to hire to help these young people say, yes, this can be you. High Tech High is pushing and pushing. You got to go to college. It's safer. It's got risks, but it's safer than the street. What about the kids now that aren't going to go because of what's happening? That's really what I'm a little bit worried about right now. I really am hoping, and we're trying to stay on the phone with them, and please go. You're right at the edge. Right. You're right at the edge. But some of these colleges, the UCs, University of California, it's a great system. A lot of them are not going to open for kids in the fall. Right. What's going to happen? Stanford, it looks like, is not going to open in the fall now. What about that? That's an incredible university. So that's a tough one.
Sherry, what about you? Because you deal with sort of vulnerable communities who are affected by civil war, by famine, by drought, by poverty around the world. There's a big responsibility on your shoulders there.
Well, one of the interesting things is in the humanitarian space, less than 3% of all funding of all aid goes to education. And so one of the things we're trying to do is raise awareness of the importance of investing in education for children and communities in crisis, and particularly early education, as I've mentioned. But, everything we're doing is not always as high tech as what Larry's doing. In order to reach children in really vulnerable settings, it's everything from, high tech, WhatsApp, mobile, but it's also battery-powered Pico projectors in a classroom, or radio. You know, we've even put DVDs on the back of rickshaws and taken them into the slums in Bangladesh and in India. And we basically spend a lot of time doing sort of reach analysis research to figure out what's the most effective way to reach children in those settings. So we go wherever they are, and that's both high tech and low tech.
So I think we need to start wrapping up because we've been on air for a little while now. I'd like to get everyone, all of my guests, if I might, just my guests on the screen. There we are. Dr. David, I know you don't have too much time because you have a job to do, unlike me. So I do want to let you get on with that. But before you go, we always, in DearWorldLive and in the Doha Debates, try and focus on the solutions, not discuss the problems. That's not for us. But I want us to really focus and think about practical advice that we could give in this moment. This is the call to action bit. What advice would you give policymakers like yourself and others around the world about the future of education in light of the lessons that we're learning as we go on through the coronavirus pandemic? Should we start with you quickly, because I know you've got to shoot off?
Thank you. And your work is really important. And so thank you for that. I do want to say so two things. One, and this is based on what Sherry was saying just now, there is a learning crisis. There is a global crisis that's happening in education alongside the health crisis. And even though we didn't invest in education before, and particularly perhaps that we didn't invest in education before, as Sherry mentioned, now we have this opportunity to course correct. We have an opportunity to say, holy crap, like there's so much that we missed, we got wrong. And now is the time for us to reimagine what our education system looks like. And if we're going to reimagine and think about the future, the questions that become important for policymakers are, how do we ensure that access and equity does not just stay on paper? There are children who may not be able to access paper material, paper technology like a dictionary or learning material, but they can get cell tower connectivity. And if they can get cell tower connectivity or radio transmission, how do we ensure that quality learning reaches those people?
Absolutely.
So to ensure that learning reaches everybody, quality and access and equity has to be thought about differently, and it has to be hybrid.
And I'll leave you in charge of that in Sierra Leone. Sherry, what about you? How could policymakers make a difference to education post-coronavirus?
Well, it won't surprise you, but I think if policymakers were investing in early education, and we also work to enlighten and educate parents, because the value of learning through play, the value of engagement with a young child during those first 5 years, there's all of the evidence to prove how critical it is, and particularly for children who've experienced trauma, because this helps mitigate what can be very long-term devastating effects to experiencing trauma in those early years if you don't have the nurturing care. And, you know, to put children on a path for Larry, to be in it's all connected for college, and to have the skills they need to rebuild their societies. If we don't start young, we don't give them the same chance for success.
I love it. Return on investment. That's what Sherry's talking about. Larry, very quickly, if I might come to you. We don't have too much time.
Okay, very quickly. First of all, half of our students get free and reduced lunch. So even though they're at home, we have to get a lunch to them every single day, which is fantastic because we all need food. I'll make it very, very quick. For people like those of us who are on this conversation who are doing this type of work, the world needs more of it. I have one thing for you and for me and for every one of us. We cannot stop. We just have to keep going and pushing and getting these kids having that type of that agency that they get from an education, a classical education, or a nouveau education, whatever it is. It's safer than being on the street. I'll put it that way.
Absolutely. Okay. Can I have all of my wonderful participants? Where's Fiona? There she is. Okay. It is time to say goodbye because that's all that we've gone over. In fact, I've given you guys a lot of time. It's time to say goodbye. So one by one, if we can go around in circle. Dr. David, Moinina, Sengeh, thank you so much. I will see you soon.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll see you soon too. Larry Rosenstock, you've been amazing. Thank you for joining me. And Sherry Westin, you too. Thank you all. I will see you.
Thank you for having us.
No problem. Okay, that's basically all the show we have planned for you. A lot of really important and interesting things were said. It was all happening so fast, I could barely get to your amazing comments and questions. Just so many good ideas. A lot of fans of Baby Shark as an educational tool in my comments. Tom, I think you're a massive fan. That's really good. To all my people watching all over the world, in Argentina, Sierra Leone, in Manila, I hope you've enjoyed the show. Some really insightful questions asking about the non-academic stuff. I know that that's something you guys care about, and I'm so glad that we got to it. So thank you for watching. That's all we have about the coronavirus affecting the coronavirus's effect on education. But if you want more Dear World Live in your life, you can watch it. You can watch it right here. We've got so many episodes at Doha available. DohaDebates.com/live is where you can see all of our previous debates on the impact the coronavirus is having on things like the refugee crisis, on the disabled community, and many, many more. Make sure you watch that. Those of you who are watching us on YouTube, thank you. Why don't you just hit that notification bell so that you can be informed of the next time we're on air? I'd love for you to do that. It would mean a lot to me. Very finally, if you've got time in your life and lots of time to fill, as we all do, why don't you listen to my brand new podcast, Course Correction? You can binge on all 19 episodes thus far. And if, like Fiona, you want to be a part of the show, you can do that as well. Why don't you get on my show next week? Just get on to email us, connect@DohaDebates.com, because next week we will be talking about how the coronavirus is impacting women and different genders. So tune in then. I will see you next Tuesday. Goodbye.